there's this clip that I always almost want to open every show with.
In Cameroon, those who became president, etc., until today, they are the people who campaign against independence. So, in their political platform was that Cameroonians are not
ripe enough for
independence.
Not
ripe enough for independence. Cameroonians need time to be independent. Cameroon should stay colonized. Cameroon should actually not be independent.
Now, when you have a government that did not want its people free, and then they are allowed to rule those people, especially when those people want their freedom, the only way they can be effective, or the only way they can have control of those people, is by force. And so the government of La République, which is a government that represents the French colonial system, which has remained in place, has been using force to control its citizens. And then it used force, or the threat of it, coupled with international complicity, was able to muscle Ambazonia into their colonial empire. But in 2015, 2016, the Ambazonian people were very determined to get out of that colonial status. They did not want to do it by force. They did not want to do it by war. They wanted to initiate a conversation. The government of La République said no and brought force. The force that has worked very well in their country into Ambazonia. On November 30th, 2017, the military of La République marched into Ambazonia and started burning villages, using the same murdering people, left and right, cutting heads. Exactly the same like they did in La République du Cameroon. And the Ambazonian people accepted the fight. But the outcome they've had in Ambazonia is not the same outcome they had in their own country. They started using other tactics. And some of the tactics they use, the so-called Swiss talks, the Swiss process. I think we all heard what one of their ministers came out recently and said about the Swiss process. That was a total fraud. Now they are on there's another process going on in Canada right now. And I'm seeking after a lot of opinions to hear what our people are beginning to think about this. And I have on the phone Terence Bangawakai, and I wanted to hear what Terence has to say about this. Terence, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Yes. Have you heard about the talks that we'll be holding in Canada soon?
Yes, there is a lot of chatter about what might be taking place in Canada, and other than that, I don't know much about it.
No, you don't know much about it because there's not much coming out. It's something that is in secret. But the funniest thing is that people are describing it as I think they have heard the word negotiations used. Have you heard a word like that too?
Yes, but I don't think it's either here or there. And I think when events like this happen, it is an opportunity for us to speak to the Ambazonian people and to remind them that their territory and lands have been occupied for over 100 years. This occupation obviously started with the Germans. The United Kingdom followed the Germans, and today we are occupied by the French using a black-faced proxy and his tribesmen in Paul Biya and his Bulu Beti tribesmen to carry out this colonial occupation and basically give title of Ambazonian lands to the French people. This is just a reminder that any conclave, any dialogue, or any negotiation, the Ambazonian people will ultimately have to decide that they and they only owned their lands. The Bafut land is owned by the Bafut people in the Ambazonian nation. The Bakossi land is owned by the Bakossi people in the Ambazonian nation. The Bakuri lands is owned by the Bakuri people in the Ambazonian nation. Anything or any dialogue or any negotiation that does not address the ownership of that land, and as we recently discussed, the stewardship of that land by those who God put them on earth to guard and guide, is a non-starter. And I think that definitely begins with addressing the annexation of the Ambazonian nation and its lands, as was so articulately described by Pierre Mesmer in his very own memoirs.
Yes, and I'm glad that you're expanding into the ownership of the land, because the Bakweri land, let's talk about the Bakweri land, because when the Germans came and they took CDC, they did not say it's now become German land. They definitely made it a Bakweri land, and they made some agreements with the Bakweri people to take that land. Is that true?
Yeah, and I believe that the whole BLCC issue was regarding the ownership of that land. Maybe at some point you may have somebody who was involved with the BLCC to speak to that. But again, it goes to show you the importance of who has stewardship over certain lands. And we recently discussed that on October 1, and I think this is the crux of the matter.
What's BLCC, by the way?
Say that again?
What's BLCC? What does that stand for?
Bakweri Lands Claims Committee. I believe that's what it stands for.
Yes, it is the land of the Bakweri people, and can only be controlled by the Bakweri legal chiefs, not fake chiefs that the colonizer is trying to create in order to blindfold people. But this show is not really about that. But I'm really glad you bring in the issue of the land, because that's what the Ambazonian people have decided, that their land will be their land. They will govern themselves in their land, and there will be no French occupation, either by direct occupation or by proxy. So that is what the agents of France in Cameroon, I've always told people that I'll call Cameroon, and we are Ambazonians. So when you say La République du Cameroun, we are trying to differentiate ourselves, but we are not Cameroons, and let's retire the name Southern Cameroons, because it benefits La République du Cameroun, it benefits the French, it benefits the Cameroon Republic. So Terence, it seems to me that they have tried war for 6 years now. They have done all the killings. They've killed all the. First of all, when they went there, they were just like mass murdering children. Any place where they see boys standing, they mass murder them. And then they started murdering babies, women, cutting heads. It looks like they thought that would work for them the same as it worked in the Bamileke Bassa lands, but it hasn't worked. And so they're now looking for other ways. They've tried the Swiss, it didn't work. They've tried national dialogue, it didn't work. They've tried a commission of bilingualism, it didn't work. They've tried, they're right now trying to enforce, what do they call that thing? Regional chieftaincies or regional...
Well, the thing with the Francophonic culture is that it's based on a powerful centralized bureaucracy.
Yes.
And in confronting the Ambazonian determination to get back control of their nation and their lands, they have come in with a type of regionalization that they have no clue as to how it will operate. What they're trying to call to the regional House of Chiefs cannot light a candle to the House of Chiefs that we had in the 50s, right?
Yes, absolutely.
We have this incompetent Francophonic minds, just bumbling around. And I think the French have, after having failed with the Swiss, they've gotten their cousins in Canada to try to play the same game. And I think the Canadian government, unfortunately, seems to want to participate in what I'll call this exceptional commonwealth of evil that allows the French to systematically and secretly murder black people. The Canadians should know that any resolution of this conflict involves the United Nations. if they want to be good faith partners, we have to start with the United Nations. The last time the people on ground zero, as we call it now, constituted themselves to engage with an international party was in 1961 in Fumba. If you recall, at that conference in Fumba, the United Nations were supposed to be there. They did not show up. The United Kingdom was supposed to be there. They did not show up. And as I keep repeating, Pierre Mesmer is very clear in saying that Fumba was a farce, that safe we scam, that safe appearance of the annexation of Ambazonia. The people of Ambazonia, the political leadership of this revolution, have outlined certain conditions that need to be met for any type of dialogue or negotiation. And one of those conditions should allow the Ambazonian people, like they did in 1961, to constitute a legitimate representative of their people in their homeland for them to go and sit down and negotiate. And at this time, the UN must show up like they did not do in 1961. If the Canadians or any of the white cousins of the French people are trying to do anything else in order to keep the Ambazonia and her lands under the control of France and her cooperation agreement, that is bound to fail. The freedom fighters on ground zero, I think they've made it very clear that it is about the control of their land, it's about their autonomy, it's about their humanity. And I think anyone who goes anywhere else in this world and tries to do anything short of that, I think it's bound to fail, just like the so-called Swiss process failed.
Well, you sound as though you think the Canadians are actually... Do you think the Canadians are actually... is it a good faith action they're trying to attempt here, or they know that this is not the way? If there's going to be a negotiation, it should be processed?
There are certain conditions that have been outlined which need to be met in order for a good faith dialogue and negotiations to start. And one of the first things that must happen was that the people in Ambazonia, the people on ground zero, must be allowed to constitute themselves to create a legitimate representation that will speak to their grievances and political aspirations as a people. That space doesn't exist. The people are being haunted by the French using a black-faced proxy in Paul Biya. There must be a ceasefire. I think that is one of the conditions that have been set. Only with a ceasefire and the protection of the human beings who occupy those lands can they sit down and constitute a legitimate and legal representation to negotiate with anybody, with any other party.
But the question I asked you though, just hold a second.
Let me finish, please. The last time they were able to do this was in 1961, and they were supposed to do this under the auspices of the United Nations and their so-called trustee. They went to Fumba, the United Nations did not show up, the UK did not show up, Pierre Mesmer indicated that the territory was annexed, and the United Nations must show up. They must show up. If the Canadians want to do anything other than to bring the United Nations 60 odd years later after they failed to show up in Fumba, then we will get in somewhere. Anything other than that. And the representation of the people must come from ground zero. It must come. These people must be delegated by the freedom fighters, those who are actually paying the ultimate price to defend those lands. You do not go out and select individuals from the diaspora, no disrespect to them. Some of them are great people, I'm sure, without the consent or without an environment that allows those people to constitute a legitimate representative. And those conditions set out by the political leadership of this movement, I believe, are reasonable and should be met before we can really get into any serious talks about dialogue and negotiations to bring finally justice, only the justice that can lead to sustainable peace.
But let me go back to asking you, do you think that the Canadians believe that they are participating in a genuine process, honest, mistakenly, but do you think they know that this is that they're playing a Cameroon government game?
I'm not giving the Canadian the benefit of the doubt. Are you going to give them the benefit of the doubt?
No, I won't, because
the Canadian government is one of those providing military assistance to the Cameroon government that is killing Africans in Ambazonian. And they now turn around and think that they can. We are not infants. We are not infants. If there are people in the diaspora who want to behave like kids and they call them here, they run over there, that's their problem. But I think the legitimate representation of the Ambazonian people must come from the freedom fighters and the people from ground zero. They should be given the space to meet freely without the predation of the French, and allow them to give a legitimate voice so that they can go and negotiate with whomever.
Well, let me say this though. I think you're making. Let me say this. Let me stop you for a second there. I think you are giving conclusions. I really want us to go step by step, because by going step by step, we hold every step of this process accountable. Because if the Canadians don't believe, and you just indicated that they are part of the support of La Republique, even in their military, that they are not being honest in the process that they engaged in. That's what I gather from what you're saying, that they are not an honest broker in this process. Because and I'm going to give you why I think that way. I think you've given one. One of the reasons is that the participants are the people who are going to be participating are handpicked by the Cameroon government, I understand. Why? What is the criteria? The second reason is that the people they actually arrested for being effective leaders of Ambazonia are in their jails. I haven't heard from those people saying, either through direct speaking to the Ambazonians or through proxy, to tell the Ambazonian people that that their representatives will be meeting in Canada with the representative of the Cameroon government. You know, the other thing is that when I looked at the internet, the way negotiations are organized between warring parties, I see something that just happened like last week, where the headlines read, the Ethiopian government has agreed to meet with Tigray under the auspices of the AU. We haven't seen anything like that. Everything when it comes to the Ambazonian, it seems it's all secretive. It's through hearsay. They won't even tell you the reason of that meeting. They won't tell you who the participants are and why they are selecting those particular participants. You've been talking a lot about the fighters on the ground. The people actually fighting are on the ground. They are not in Washington or anywhere else in the world. All these people who are everywhere else in the world in the diaspora are people who should be supporting the ground. And if they're not supporting the ground, then they're playing a game that is not affecting the ground. So, what do you have to say, please?
You said a few things. The Ethiopians and the people of Tigray, Ethiopia is one of those countries I don't think was really colonized. And it's not subjected to the type of influences that, these France-Afrique countries are subjected to. France-Afrique countries, which I like to call them departments of France, are subjected to the influence of France and sit at the Security Council. And so it's very difficult for a French proxy African state to engage with a non-French proxy African state. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. The
way that the Ethiopians and the folks from Tigray might decide that at some point we'll have to talk with each other, right?
Yes.
Because this is Ambazonia versus France. This is not Ambazonia versus Cameroon. And France comes into this equation with all our Western cousins. right?
Yes.
They come into this equation with the backing of the United States of America. They come into this equation with the backing of the Germans, with the Swedes, the Canadians. These people that are accused of constituting this commonwealth of evil as far as the Ambazonian nation and people are concerned. Because the solution to this problem is very clear. This is a territory that was annexed by another country that had its
But before you continue, let me say this though. I don't know that America is involved or the other countries. I just know it's a Canadian-led mission
I'm
here.
talking generally speaking, right?
Okay.
The American side with French interest. That's what I'm saying. And I think as we've talked about, one of the responsibilities that we have is to make sure that is understood, that solidarity doesn't go. It's not in the best interest of the average American, and obviously not the average Ambazonian. So we need to be very clear about that. America currently have a one Cameroon policy. That's an unjust policy, and that's a policy that is not sustainable in the long term, because it takes a very sizable number of people and diminishes them. And the Americans are supporting that policy. And we know that because Thibault Nash said that. Right?
Yes.
And that when he was there, he obviously doesn't agree with the policy, but he was there to implement that policy. Right?
Yes.
So that's a policy that suits French interests in that part of the world. And they have, whether we like it or not, they have a very significant role to play as part of this, what I call this NATO alliance that backs Paul Biya in his murder of fellow Africans.
Let me ask you this. So it doesn't look like it's a fair process. It doesn't look like the Canadians are out to really accomplish. Because if it's not fair, then it's probably just a delaying tactic, right?
Well, you talked about the people that they got arrested because they felt that they would be very effective in this struggle and are being in the custody of the French in Kondengi. The people who were arrested have put out what I think are really reasonable conditions for us to engage in dialogue and negotiations. I think there are 4 of them. And I think one of the first one is the ceasefire. And at the risk of repeating myself, a ceasefire to have these people remove the troops that have been burning villages and killing civilians out of the land, so that the people on the ground, including the freedom fighters and the civil society on ground zero, can come together like they did in 1961. And I know we had a government there. But this time they can come together, select people that they believe can speak on their behalf to defend their legitimate and legal interests. If there are people in the diaspora who the people on ground zero believe that they can also legitimately speak on their behalf, they will select them. And maybe some of them will be in Canada, who knows? But I think those conditions, those reasonable conditions that were set out by the political leadership of this struggle, to be met before any type of reasonable negotiations and dialogue to take place need to be met. I don't think the Canadians have addressed that, and that's why I think that what they are doing is not going to go anywhere, unfortunately.
Okay, with that, do you? Let's turn to the Ambazonian people. What do you tell those who are attending this conference, who are honoring it, who are giving it some I don't want to even say legitimacy, but they're giving it some importance?
Well, the people who are fighting for this struggle are on ground zero. Okay? The freedom fighters. One of the main developments over the last few months is that the people on ground zero are taking back this struggle away from the diaspora, because the diaspora has been disrupted. And we cannot stop people from going to any meeting that they are invited to. I think that the way some of these things have been done the so-called capacity building of the Swiss dogs, and now this thing in Canada is a complete infantilization of the Ambazonian people.
Okay, let me say something with that. Look, I don't think people just have a choice to go wherever they want, especially if they're going in our name. So I'm trying to have us, because when they go there, they mess up the whole process for all of us. They infantilize all of us,
What I am saying.
So I think the Ambazonian, look, as an Ambazonian, I would say, if you don't judge that process to be advisable, if it doesn't fit some of the criteria that Terence is mentioning, that the leaders who are in jail did put forward, then don't go. If you're going to represent yourself, but you represent yourself in our name, and that brings us a bad name. And so I think we should encourage them or discourage them.
Well, one of the things that I think I've learned along the way is that you cannot really tell people, especially in the circumstances that we exist, we cannot tell people what to do or what not to do. We cannot compel them. You can make arguments. So
no, we can at least in a forum like this tell them that they are just free radicals going around causing havoc, which is a havoc that ends with them.
Yes, so we can make arguments that they may find compelling. And that's why I'm saying that when events like this happen, it is an opportunity to speak to the Ambazonian people, especially those on ground zero who are bearing the brunt of this French brutality, those who have opted to become freedom fighters. It is an opportunity to speak to them and to tell them the importance of their place in deciding the future of their homeland. For most of these people in the diaspora that the Canadians or the Cameroon government have selected, I can guarantee you that 90% of them are nationals of other nations. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. What do you mean?
They have different citizenship. I have an American citizenship. Some of them have American citizenship. Some of them have British passports, and so on. Right?
Well, that shouldn't. I think the important issue is whether they should be attending this, because Americans, Ambazonians can hire third parties to represent them.
No, yes, what I am saying is that who makes that quote unquote hiring of third parties? These people are being selected without the voice of the people of the freedom fighters on ground zero, without the voice of what I would call. There is a civil society in Ambazonia that is completely for the independence, but they cannot speak because they are being blanketed by a terroristic outfit. You know what I'm saying? And one of the conditions is that we have to lift this blanket of terror, of predation above these people, so that they can constitute themselves and ultimately select the people who speak on their behalf. And if they are Ambazonian Americans and Ambazonian Germans or Ambazonian Britons, that the people on ground zero, in all of their wisdom, decide that they're going to speak on their behalf, then so be it. But I do not think that this scheme of having the Swedes go around and some of these guys that they are inviting, there are some very serious allegations against them about their moral standing.
Yes, I was going to come and speak to that, but finish your statement, please. Finish your statement.
Yeah. So as far as their moral standing is concerned, there's argument to make that some of them are very dubious, and at the end of the day, I think my opinion is that the people on ground zero must have a say as to who will represent their interests, and especially so the freedom fighters. Freedom fighters ultimately always have the say in these matters. Of course, they're not going to be the ones going there, but I think their voice to select a legitimate representation, and I believe that they have the intelligence, they have the sophistication, to select the type of people that should represent them.
Yes, coming back to the participants and alluding to something you were saying, I have heard that I mean the word is out there that most of those who have been selected or that were recommended by the government of Cameroon to select to be present at that Canadian meeting are those they've bribed and they're in their pockets, and then some of them are also. Uh, I'm looking for a right name to call them because I can't call them organizations. But some of them are outfits that are looking for legitimacy because they have just called any Tom and Dick that is not important. And I think, and they have left out every single person who should be important in that meeting. And so that already can tell you what the purpose of that meeting is. And it's a meeting that anybody who believes in the liberation of the Ambazonian people should not be participating in. That's my voice.
Okay. Yeah, I think you said it all.
Anything else you want to add, sir?
No, that's it.
All right. Thank you.